So I used to be a big fan of the Rooster Teeth podcast. I wasn't much into all the other content that they produce, but I was always fascinated by the company Rooster Teeth in itself, because to me it was nearly the perfect social media company. It was like a win-win situation for the fans as well as the company. They obviously made loads of money, but the fans also, they got like, the RTX event and all these shows that they got, all those personalities that they built up, all that content that they produced that fans really enjoyed. So it felt like the fans were getting something from it. And through the memberships, the company made a lot of money. But I observed on myself at the point when Burnie Burns left the company that I kind of lost interest. And I didn't really know why, whether it really was about the personality of Burnie Burns being on the Rooster Teeth podcast or what that was all about. But I found that curious. I found it curious that suddenly I stopped listening to the podcast. I stopped having interest in the company, in the personalities. And I found out that I was not the only one. Reading this article on Bloomberg, which is about the AT&T sale of Rooster Teeth, I'll link it down in the description. You can read up on it yourself. But in that article, it says that even before the pandemic, Rooster Teeth was struggling. Revenue slumped to about 50 million in 2019 from about 70 million a year earlier. One of the people said, I mean, obviously, don't get me wrong, making 50 million is still an incredible amount of money for a social media company or a company like Rooster Teeth, but you can see there is a clear trend. Already prior to the pandemic, there seemed to be a decline in interest. So it wasn't only me, right? It was not just me who lost interest in the company. There seemed to be more and more people. And I just want to make this really clear before we go forward in this video. I'm not here to slander Rooster Teeth. I still think it's a fascinating company, it's a positive company, but obviously they had their fair share of controversies that also just created a lot of damage and harmed the company significantly. Obviously, above all, the controversy around Ryan Haywood, who was fired in early October 2020. This is a topic we discussed extensively on this channel. I'll link my video, including a full timeline of what happened, all the events, down in the description as well, so you can go check out that video after you finished with this one. But beyond all that, there was another milestone that hit me and that I was trying to understand and wrap my head around. And that was that in September 2019, Lawrence Sonntag and Bruce Greene left the company. They left Funhaus, which obviously was like a subsidiary of Rooster Teeth, and obviously no explanation was really given about why they left or what the context of that is. But now, in an interview with Shaun Bolen on the Hang Time podcast on Twitch, which used to be Game Attack, the Game Attack channel, Lawrence Sonntag and Shaun Bolen talk a little bit about why he left, what the context of it was, and reveal some interesting background information around Rooster Teeth. So I couldn't hold back on reading it myself, obviously, and I want to share it with you guys. So what we're going to do in this video, we're going to fly through these bullet points, which summarize what has been said in the podcast itself. Luckily, the Reddit user, The Next Champion, went to the effort of putting this podcast into bullet points. Obviously, there is a link to the podcast, so you can go check it out by yourself. I'll link it down in the description as well. So if you want to get the full picture, it is 1 hour, 17 minutes long. You can go check it out at full length for yourself if you don't trust those notes. So let's start right on the top. Lawrence starts by saying he does not want this to shoot the entire time about his former employees. And again, that comes back to what I said as well. I don't want to slander Rooster Teeth. I still think there's a lot of potential in this company. I was really attached. I loved the Rooster Teeth podcast for a very long time. So I'm not really here, to talk it down or talk bad about them. But I try to shed some light on what's going on, what went wrong potentially with the company, just to understand it, right? How can a company like that in my mind was nearly too big to fail at some point, actually decrease in size, let go of so many people, and drive people to the point where they actually leave the company. FullScreen initially only wanted some of the inside gaming crew, but they stood united and were hired all together, right? So you get a rough idea of this corporate spirit there. FullScreen, by the way, is the company that in 2014 acquired Rooster Teeth, and they just own a lot of companies like that. So they were trying to push to not hire the whole inside gaming team, and they pretty much said, we want these personalities, maybe not the editors or something like that. Maybe they're trying to save some money, right? Business decisions. Lawrence indicates FullScreen didn't pay them as much as promised after taking a chunk of the revenue. Shaun realized very quickly how disorganized FullScreen was as a channel manager, as two small group of managers were focusing on the hundreds of content creators they wanted on staff. All right, so again, it highlights that FullScreen was all about budget management, okay? And they were like, no, we have hundreds of content creators, but we just need very few people to manage them. I'm not sure they mean 2 people, literally like 2, or it was too small of a group. So a few of them, maybe a few more. In any case, it wasn't enough. That's what they're saying. Lawrence saw the atmosphere being spend money now, worry 2 years later, with decisions and consequences, both at Machinima and FullScreen. Lawrence claims Machinima and FullScreen would push the talent harder and harder to get even a tiny drop of blood from a stone. So again, right, it's all about not necessarily creating great content or pushing talented creators. It's more about squeezing as much as you can out of those creators. And I've said it in another video, but this is fairly common in all kinds of creative industries. I've seen it myself, where people get hired, talented people, young people get hired, and then the company just squeezes them and exploits them as hard as they can over a few years, drains them to the point of complete exhaustion, and then just drop them, and move on to the next guy. So it sounds a little bit like that was also the attitude here. But again, I don't think this is unique to FullScreen. This is fairly common in many of the creative industries out there. When Lawrence saw the same signs at FullScreen/Rooster Teeth as he did at Machinima, he proclaims, this was supposed to be the good one. Lawrence goes into the history of how multi-channel networks get into subscription services like Rooster Teeth's membership, says original content would get too expensive for little gain in trying to compete with Netflix. He says the executives would incorrectly think people would flock to pay these services and skip Netflix, right? So that's remarkable to me, okay? That a company like Rooster Teeth would think, if we just pump a bit more money into these shorts and in Genlock and in all these kind of animated series and content that we produce, people are actually willing to skip Netflix for the Rooster Teeth membership. I mean, not to say that nobody did that, but that's delusional, right? If you look at what Netflix is offering, I mean, let's be honest, okay, there's a lot of trash out there as well, but just the sheer amount of content that Netflix is offering and the diversity of that content, there's just no way that a company like Rooster Teeth could compete with that, and let alone, move people away from a service like that so people sign up for Rooster Teeth membership. So that is the point, where you're beyond the idea of just being all about profit. This is the point where you're nearly like delusional about your role as a company and your role with your fans. And it feels like the expectations that FullScreen had at Rooster Teeth at this point were just like way out of proportion of what is actually feasible and makes sense. Lawrence says Rooster Teeth creative mentality changed once premium content became the focus and a lot of pressure was put onto people to make it successful. And you would be considered a failure if you didn't hit the quota. So again, keep in mind, you have this head company that thinks, people got to hit the quota so we can compete with Netflix. We got to be bigger and better than Netflix. And if that is your starting point to produce content and to kind of feed content into these memberships, that's insane. Like that's completely crazy. Lawrence says this did expand his creativeness and gave him some opportunities he wouldn't get if he didn't try them out. Shaun says it didn't mean you would get financial benefit from it. Lawrence claims Machinima was only paying him between $35,000 and $40,000 yearly in Los Angeles, and it was one of the reasons he quit. That's insane. That's crazy. I mean, for a lot of people, that might be a huge sum of money, making $35,000 to $40,000 a year. But in Los Angeles, like that is a very, very expensive city, and that is nearly nothing. And some people in the comments under this thread actually highlight as well that content creators like Alana Pierce have similar problems, right? Because they just don't get paid enough. They get exploited by these head companies, and she apparently, didn't know this, but lives in a small apartment. Every time she wants to record something on her PC, she needs to move her stove or something. Like she lives in such a small apartment, and now with the pandemic and all that, she couldn't really move. No, I don't want to put up the case for Lana Pierce. That's a totally different story. It's just what I read in the comments, so I don't want to put any credibility on that. But I think it's a common problem that these people who are actually often the face of these companies, of these channels, get paid ridiculous amounts of money for what they represent and what they should be paid, or what money they're making their bosses. Shaun said he was only making $36,000 as a community manager for FullScreen, so that's also not a lot. A random FullScreen party in Malibu made Shaun realize this was not going to last. Basically a bunch of people spending money they did not have and never going to see it come back. Another reason Lawrence became independent was seeing years of people below him in terms of creativeness were moving up the ladder and getting paid more compared to himself. It was, do your job and do these things too. And fix these monetary issues we keep getting ourselves into, says Lawrence. Yeah, the workload was insane there, says Shaun. Shaun admits Death Battle helps Game Attack stay relevant with Rooster Teeth, but he also didn't want to be pigeonholed writing content for that channel and focus on other things. Lawrence says crunching at work one day to then go to a full day taping where he got eliminated early in the video and had to sit on the sidelines all day was the tipping point for him wanting to quit. Again, this is such an expression of this company not respecting your private life and really not caring about their employees. If you've been crunching all day and you've been editing videos, sitting in that studio for 8 hours and you're basically already tired on the end of a day or probably on the end of a night, then you're going to a full day of taping, you get eliminated early, you're sitting on the sidelines, you have literally nothing to do, and nobody says, bro, listen, I know you've been crunching already, you should go home, here's money for a taxi or whatever, just leave, rest a bit. And instead they make you just sit there and waste your time, and nobody kind of acknowledges that you're dedicating your time to this while you're literally doing nothing. That is just horrible. And that stuff just grinds you down. And again, I can also report from other creative industries that I've worked in that similar things are happening, okay? The main focus is get the project done. The main focus is, on the director and shooting and getting everything in place so we get great content. Nobody cares about the guy who's sitting on the sidelines and who's been eliminated and who's already been crunching for like 12 hours somewhere in the studio. That person literally does not exist in the eye of these companies, and that is the stuff that as an employee just destroys you, okay, because you're a person and you want some people to at least acknowledge that you're a person and that you're dedicating a lot to this right now. So I can very much relate to these kinds of points he's making there. Rooster Teeth laying off 25% of the Inside Gaming crew despite working hard to manage the brand was essentially the final nail in the coffin to quit. Again, I think this comes back to the beginning where we said, Rooster Teeth is making, like, even in a bad year, when profits are decreasing, they're making 50 million in profit, but they can't keep the full Inside Gaming crew and ripping this team apart. And beyond, obviously, these people not having a job anymore, it does way more damage to a brand like this where people are friends, people work together, people are used to working together, they know each other, they know, how this guy edits the video, how this guy edits the video, and then they're ripping it apart, again, for short-term profits. It just rips a hole into a team like that, and it breeds a lot of frustration. I mean, obviously I wasn't there, but I can imagine that this kind of stuff is just horrible beyond just the layoffs, okay? It leaves a hole, and it gives you a feeling of, I could be next. Why did they do it? Leaves a lot of questions, a lot of uncertainty going forward. And all this breeds like a horrible mood if you're in a company where you're supposed to create fun content. So again, extremely short-sighted there from the management and showing that they didn't really know what they were dealing with, it feels like at least. Shaun had 2 tipping points. One was feeling relief that the industry got cancelled despite putting so much hard work into the series. Another was Rooster Teeth telling Screw Attack to stop taking donations on streams despite it helping Rooster Teeth financially. Okay, I don't know why that decision was made, like why Screw Attack would say, hey, stop taking donations on stream. I'd imagine that money is not just going to these, content creators privately, but obviously would be going to Rooster Teeth first, and then maybe there are some kind of benefits that these companies getting if they're getting a lot of donations. But again, these seem to be these kind of political intricacies of companies like that, where someone makes a decision that has like a ripple effect, leads to decisions like that, where you're just like, it's just horrible. Stuff gets politicized, decisions are being made without a reason or without an apparent reason, and it's very hard to grasp that if you're the content creator, like, why is this happening? Why are they making these terrible decisions and stop us from having donations on stream? So I understand that is also extremely frustrating. Shaun says being part of a multi-channel network taught him the value of not being owned and having trust with a core audience, even if it's smaller. Lawrence agrees and says working with multi-channel networks helped him give him a core audience that is growing with his independent projects. Obviously, right? Because we know these guys. These are personalities that we know from Inside Gaming. Now they're doing their own projects. The same applies to Bruce Greene and stuff. And I think a big reason why they can live off Twitch and be successful streamers and live off that kind of income is because they were part of Inside Gaming, of Rooster Teeth, of Funhaus, of all these Machinima, whatever platforms that established them as known characters of the industry. Both Shaun and Lawrence state that they do appreciate working at FullScreen/Rooster Teeth, and that there were just as many good days as bad, and that they helped them to give them a core audience. All right, so again, I think same as my video, everyone wants to maintain a tone of respect, and nobody wants to slander these companies and say it was horrible, everything was horrible, and they didn't pay us enough. But I think it is valuable to read breakdowns like this, right? And to look behind the scenes of these companies and to reveal these kind of truths that are happening behind closed doors in companies like Rooster Teeth. And to be honest, just speaking for myself here for a second, I feel that the story around Rooster Teeth and what it has become, and that nobody talks about it openly, that everyone nearly silences it in the company. Everyone keeps just going with more content as if nothing ever happened, whether it's the Ryan Haywood story or it was the Adam Kovic story at the time, or whether it's facts like the ones that Lawrence Sonntag is talking about here, that nobody ever sits down. I know this is uncommon for any company, but that nobody ever sits down and talks about these things and just puts them out there and goes to that level of transparency with the fans just to say, you deserve to know these kinds of stories. I think that also for me was a big nail in the coffin of this company, because I wanted to know these stories. I wanted to know what's going on. I want to know why Burnie Burns left exactly. I don't want to have like a political surface answer that tells us a story that's clearly made up to kind of limit the damage. I kind of want to know the truth. You don't need to tell the whole story, and I'm sure Lawrence is also not revealing the full truth in this interview, and that's perfectly fine. But a company like Rooster Teeth, for me at least, was also so valuable and unique and kind of a win-win situation, as I mentioned in the beginning, because of its transparency, because it suggested to the fans that they can really see behind the scenes of this company, see what's going on, how the shows are created, who's doing what, and what's happening behind closed doors. And at the point when these scandals hit them and people are leaving the company, nobody ever addressed that really. And I know there were some videos that shed a little bit light on it, but those videos were put out there and then everyone just moved on as if nothing happened. And it just wasn't enough. And I feel, at least I can only speak for myself, I felt in a weird way, I can't describe it differently, but I felt betrayed by this. And I felt that the company owes me to an extent to break these things that we just read down to me and explain it to me as a fan, to me as someone who's been listening to the podcast for many years, even more to people who have been members for so many years. Like, what's going on? Like, be transparent, be open, be upfront about it. We all understand these are not nice stories, right? The whole Ryan Haywood story was horrible. And I know there were, again, some videos where Jeff and stuff cleared up some things, but then everyone just moves on. And it's like, oh, here's, another funny gameplay video. And it's like, no, hold on. Let's hit the brakes here for a second. And let's really work on this, okay? Let's work this through. Let's go back and forth. Let's get into a conversation with people. We don't need to talk about it forever, but let's earn the point where we are ready to move on, okay? Let's not just move on preemptively, but let's earn that. That's the best way how I can describe it. So I think with decisions like these, and that we had to wait so many years to get little details like that, like from Lawrence here, Rooster Teeth did a lot of damage to themselves, and with not realizing the potential and importance of that level of transparency, because they are a unique company. They've always been one, and I felt in these regards, they fell a bit short, in my personal opinion. But anyway, guys, these are just my thoughts. Obviously, there's much more to the story, but I found this quite an insightful breakdown, and I've learned quite a few things that shed a little bit more light on the context of the time, why Lawrence left, why they made the decisions that they made. And to be honest, I can't blame them. Okay, I can't blame them. And I still don't understand, why people like Elise Williams or James Williams are still with this company. I mean, there must be something to it. Presumably, these wages that Lawrence spoke about that were admittedly very low for living in LA only applied to their time at Machinima. So hopefully he earned significantly more at Funhaus. So hopefully, Elise and James, these kind of people just earn more when doing hard work for Funhaus. But I can relate to the idea of saying, look, we've kind of earned our fame. Okay, people know who we are. If Elise Williams and James Williams, who are a couple, would move away now from any Rooster Teeth related company and do their own Twitch streaming endeavor or whatever, I'm sure it would be extremely successful and they would probably earn more money than they would with Funhaus. I don't know why. It would be interesting to hear more stories like this, but obviously Lawrence can only speak about these kinds of stories because he's been away from the company for so long now that he has enough distance, and he's not obliged to anything, I'm guessing. So he can openly talk about these things without harming the company, without harming his colleagues and stuff. So I don't think we'll see much more of it, especially from people who still work at Rooster Teeth or at Funhaus, but it was an interesting insight and I wanted to share it with you guys. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. If you did, then don't forget to smash the like button. I appreciate it. It helps the channel out. Also, you can subscribe. There will be more content on the channel. The button is right down there. Hit the bell as well so you're not missing future uploads. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. I'm out. Bye.